Welcome to the recorded version of Managing the Stress of a Family Caregiver, part of the Family Caregiver Support webinar series brought to you by the American Society on Aging and a generous sponsorship from Home Instead Senior Care.
Dr. Dupree, a gerontological social worker, is an internationally renowned expert on lifestyle issues relating to caregiving, retirement, aging, and family dynamics. Dr. Amy is president of Essential Conversations, Inc., and Dr. Amy, Inc., a company dedicated to family caregiver wellness. Dr. Dupree holds a PhD and master's in social work, specializing in gerontology, and earned her CSA, a designation for which she also trains others as part of their accreditation. Dr. Amy Dupree is a much sought-after speaker at corporate and professional events on topics of caregiving, aging, and retirement, and she is also a frequent guest on radio and television. And with that, I would like to welcome our presenter. Welcome, Dr. Amy.
Well, thanks, Steve. I'm really glad to be here because today we're getting to talk about a subject that is really near and dear to my heart, which is this idea about how do we deal with caregiver stress. And, I've been working in the field for 28 years now and with caregivers, and I understand the stress that people go through from a professional standpoint, but I also spent a decade caregiving for my own parents, so can speak a bit about the personal as well. And when Mary Alexander joins us, she also has both of those hats that she wears, the professional and the personal. So hopefully we'll be able to have good discussion today that will help make people's lives easier. So, the thing is, when it comes to defining the extent of the volume of caregiving, you may have all heard this quote by Rosalind Carter. She said there are four kinds of people in the world: those who've been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And I'm guessing today on the line we've got mainly people who are caregiving for folks. And I'm going to talk from that perspective, assuming that you're caregivers. I may talk about caregiving for parents, but I know many of you are caregiving for other people. Really, the issues are the same. Different relationships, but the caregiver stress issue is very similar. We know that today in the U.S. alone, about 1/4 of adults are caring for an aging parent, relative, or spouse. That's a lot of us caregiving. Now, in most cases, the caregiver is either the spouse or the oldest daughter or the grown child who lives the closest to the person who needs care. We know, and as you're doing this, you know that it can be a very rewarding and bonding experience. However, we also know it can be really stressful and it can cause a lot of tension within families. There was a recent study conducted by Home Instead Senior Care that found that 31% of family caregivers admit they'd really like some more help, and 25% said, you know what, I actually resent my other family members who don't help out more. That's a pretty big percentage. The stress obviously gets worse if you as the caregiver have other really important and pressing responsibilities like a job, or you have kids that you're caring for, or you just have a busy social life, or perhaps you have distance to travel when you're caring for your parent. The truth is caregiving can be really hard for a spouse, especially when the person who needs care requires around-the-clock assistance. It can really mean they don't get a break. It can even become dangerous if the spousal caregiver has his or her own issues to deal with, health issues to deal with, because those problems can get worse just from the stress of caregiving and the lack of attention to the caregiver's own needs. Now, obviously, we don't want to and we can't ignore the needs of the people we're caring for. However, there are lots of ways that we can talk about to reduce the stress of caregiving and to help you remain healthy during this caregiving experience. So let's talk about what we're going to discuss today. So in the webinar today, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the extent of caregiving stress, so you have a better picture of that. We're also going to talk about the signs of caregiver stress and depression. Sometimes people miss these because they're so engaged in what they're doing and in their lives that they don't even realize they're really suffering from a lot of stress or depression. We're also going to explore ways to reduce the challenges of caring for a family member with dementia, because we know caring for a family member with dementia has a lot of serious implications that are different from caring for someone who does not have dementia. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some tips and strategies that hopefully will help you lessen the stress and the burnout and the depression that you might experience as a family caregiver. So let's start by looking at the extent of caregiver stress. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, more than 50 million people provide care for either a chronically ill or disabled or older family member or friend during any given year. 30% of those people who are providing care are themselves over 65, and another 15% are between 45 and 54. Now, there's no really reliable estimate of the number of family caregivers, but what we know is at least 7 million Americans are caring for a parent at any given time. That's a lot of people. So I have to say, if you're a woman listening to this, this will probably not come as a surprise, but the National Alliance for Caregiving has found that the typical family caregiver is a 46-year-old woman who's caring for her widowed mother who does not live with her. She's married, and she's also working. The fact is, actually, 60% of caregivers are women, just about. It's actually very close to that. And, you know, I do want to mention that means that about 40% are men, because we don't often talk about that a lot. We know that women tend to do the heavy lifting when it comes to caregiving, which means that they're the ones who are often dealing with the personal care issues and the emotional issues related to caregiving. Men do very important things. They're often doing things such as yard work or household repairs, dealing with the finances, running errands. Women just tend to do the things that are more hands-on care. Now, as we watch the baby boomer population age in our country, we expect that the need for caregivers is going to really increase. People over the age of 65 are expected to increase at a 2.3% rate. But the number of family caregivers who are family members who are available to care for them are only going to increase by 1%. So you can see we've got quite a gap there. That's expected to result in more stress for people because they're going to have more to do with fewer people to help them. Already, many of you, and you're part of millions of working adults, are juggling the competing demands of caring for a chronically ill or disabled parent, also raising a family, and trying to manage a career. We know that working caregivers sacrifice leisure time, and they often suffer stress-related illnesses. Negative effects on working caregivers include things like time lost from work, lower productivity, quitting a job to give care, and just missing out on career opportunities and having lower future earnings. All of that in order to provide good care to someone we love. Again, a recent study by Home Instead Senior Care found that caregivers comprise about 13% of the workforce. That's amazing, isn't it? And nearly 20% of family caregivers are providing 40 hours of care a week or more. That's a lot of care on top of working. As a result, a lot of people, 10%, have had to go from full-time to part-time jobs so that they can meet these caregiving responsibilities. So when we look at that, what we know for those, those who are caregiving is that it's having a real negative effect on their wages. The American Council of Life Insurers found that during the year 2000, the typical working family caregiver lost $109 per day in wages and health benefits because of the need to provide full-time care. Now, we know that eventually some 12% of caregivers quit their jobs to provide full-time care. So if you're in the position that you're nodding your head along with these figures and saying, yep, that sounds like me, what I want to chat with you about now are some employee support programs that might be helpful for you. The MetLife Mature Market Institute found that American businesses can lose as much as $34 billion each year due to employees' needs to care for senior loved ones. Both male and female children of aging parents make changes to their work in order to try to accommodate their caregiving responsibilities. And as we said, that can be modifying your schedule or coming in late, leaving early, altering work-related travel. We also know that people engage in something that we call presenteeism, the idea that you're there, but you're not really there because your parent's calling all the time, or you're having to call your parent's doctor to get on the phone, and wait and make appointments. And all of that takes away from the workplace. Now, there's not really hard research that exists to prove this, but researchers in the field think that only 2% of employed family caregivers really take advantage of the benefits their companies offer. So if you're working for a company right now, you want to look into some of this. So some of the common employee support programs that you can look at include something that your employer may offer, which may be a cafeteria-style employee benefit. That allows you to select supplemental dependent care coverage to reimburse costs for in-home care or adult daycare. The benefit may also cover therapeutic counseling to help you cope with the stress of caregiving. So that's really worth looking into. Human resources or employee assistance program staff can provide information for you on those, and also they can be really helpful about internet sites, local information and referral services or resource centers, and some larger businesses actually organize in-house caregiver support groups, or they coordinate with local community groups or hospitals so that you can attend an outside support group. One of the most critical benefits for employees with caregiving responsibilities is time. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you that because you're probably wishing you had more time. So you might want to check in to see, would your work allow you to do flexible work hours? Are there family illness days you can take advantage of? And is there leave time that you might be able to use when necessary? And this way you can modify your work schedule to accommodate your caregiving needs. But you have to have conversations with the people at your workplace to see if this is possible. Now, if you work for a company that has 50 or more employees, that company has to comply with the Family and Medical Leave Act, which allows for up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave to care for a seriously ill parent, a spouse, a child, while protecting your job security. The truth is, a lot of smaller firms also use those guidelines to provide support for their employees. So again, worth checking into. So it's a great idea to talk to your employer, talk to your human resource department, your boss, to see what you could do, because doing this could really alleviate some of your stress. Now, speaking of stress, we're going to talk about some of the signs of the physical and emotional parts of stress to see if you have any of this going on, and so that you're aware of what you need to be looking for. So when we talk about the signs of stress, the first thing I have to say to you is that I chat with people all the time about this, and they'll say, I'll ask them, do you have this, do you have this? And they'll say, gee, I didn't realize that was a sign of stress. So really the first step in dealing with caregiver stress is to recognize the signs. Then once you recognize the signs, you can find ways to deal with it, and you can get the support you need, or if necessary, medical help. So you see on the screen that you have some signs there of physical signs of stress, including disturbed sleep and muscle pain, headaches, digestive problems, weight gain, loss. There's a few others I want to add to that. It says digestive problems, and many of us don't realize that a lot of our stomach issues are stress-related, and that can include upset or acid stomach, cramps, heartburn, gas, irritable bowel syndrome, constipation, diarrhea. All of those can have a stress component to them. In addition, there's some other signs of stress you should be aware of, including loss of hair, fatigue. If you have a constant extreme fatigue, it may be a sign of stress. High blood pressure and irregular heartbeats, palpitations, that can be a sign of stress. Chest pains, even something simple as excessive perspiration can be a sign of stress. Skin disorders like hives and eczema, psoriasis, ticks, or itching, those can all be signs of stress. Periodontal disease and jaw pain. Often people start clenching their jaw or grinding their teeth. If you have reproductive problems or infertility, that can be a sign. And certainly if you find yourself getting more colds or flus or infections, it may be a sign that your immune system's a bit weakened, and that's something you need to look into. And then if you find that you have sexual dysfunction or just that you have a lack of libido, that can be a real big sign of physical stress. Now you see emotional signs on your screen as well: anxiety, depression, moodiness, memory problems, substance abuse. So there's others there too. That sense of irritability I want to talk about, because often people get very irritable when they're stressed. So if you find yourself being grumpy a lot, it's something to think about. Also, if you feel out of control, if you find yourself having increased use of substances, that's important. It says substance abuse there, but you don't even have to be abusing. If you just find you're drinking more, it's something to notice. Phobias, being more argumentative, feeling isolated, just feeling kind of a general lack of satisfaction in your life. Noticing the way stress affects you physically is sometimes easier than seeing how it affects you emotionally. You may want to think about how your spouse or children are reacting to you. If you're more grumpy than normal, you may find that they're just kind of avoiding you a bit or not spending as much time with you. You know, many people know how difficult it is to be a caregiver, so your family and your friends and your coworkers may not say anything to you if they've noticed a change in your attitude or your demeanor. However, if you're wondering yourself, you might ask one or two close family members or friends if they've noticed any change in you. Their feedback may be really helpful for you to put your finger on the symptoms and, most importantly, to use that to start getting help. Now, if you are experiencing any of these signs, especially if you're noticing more than 2 or 3, please consider talking with a healthcare professional who can help you evaluate your situation. If you get support, it really can help you reduce your stress as well as reduce the physical and emotional symptoms that you're getting, and will help put you in better stead for your health in the future. Remember that it's not selfish to focus on your own needs and desires when you're a caregiver. A lot of times we think we're all supposed to put it all out to the person we love. But the truth is we have to take care of ourselves first. You know, there's a reason when we fly that they say put your own oxygen mask on before putting anyone else's on next to you. And that's because we need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. It's vital that you make sure you take initiative with your own physical and emotional care. If you neglect yourself, it probably will make you less useful to the person for whom you're caring for, and it certainly may impact you negatively for years to come. You know, caregiving is, I talk about caregiver wellness a lot, the idea that we can care for someone else and at the same time take good care of ourselves. It's not easy, but we have to really make sure we don't give up our own self-care. There was a study done by Alyssa Eppel from the University of California, and she found that the family caregivers experience extreme stress have actually been shown to age prematurely. This level of stress can take as much as 10 years off of a caregiver's life. So there's a very good reason to take good care of yourself. According to an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, elderly spousal caregivers with a history of chronic illness themselves who are now experiencing caregiving-related stress have a 63% higher mortality rate than their non-caregiving peers. Isn't that amazing? That's incredibly high. Stress certainly causes many physical changes in our bodies. It can also trigger depression. So what I want to do now is chat with you about caregiver depression and some ways that you can recognize it and cope with it. A study from the American Journal of Public Health says that family caregivers who provide 36 hours or more care a week are more likely than non-caregivers to experience symptoms of depression or anxiety. So that 36-hour part seems to be the trigger. And that's pretty amazingly high when you think about adding that care to an already busy life. Now, for a spouse, the rate is 6 times higher, and for those caring for a parent, the rate is twice as high. So in general, women caregivers, we know, experience depression at a higher rate than men. So if you're on this call today and you're listening to this, I hope if you have any symptoms of depression that you don't ignore these and that you get the help you need. Now, we know caregiving doesn't cause depression. Let me just say that. Nor does everyone who provides care experience negative feelings or depression. But the truth is, in an effort to provide the best care possible for a family member or a friend, oftentimes we know that caregivers will sacrifice their own physical and emotional needs, and the emotional and physical experience involved with providing care in and of itself can strain even the most capable person. So please don't feel like a failure if you're on the call today and you're feeling depressed or anxious or really stressed. It's not unusual is the point of this. Now, the resulting feelings of anger, anxiety, sadness, isolation, exhaustion can really take a heavy toll on people. And then sometimes what we add to having all those feelings is we feel guilty that we feel those things. So again, if you're feeling any of those feelings, you have a lot of company and you don't have to continue to live with that stress. It's too bad that feelings of depression are often seen as a sign of weakness rather than just a sign that something's out of balance. So that's what you can tell yourself if you're feeling depressed. It's not that you're weak, but something's out of balance. And, if you have people in your life who are saying things to you like, just snap out of it, or it's all in your head, that's not helpful, and it's just not true. It's not something you can just snap out of. That's unfortunately a belief that people have about a lot of mental health concerns, that they're not real. Yet we know ignoring or denying your feelings doesn't make them go away. That's really not going to help. We know people experience depression in different ways, and the type and the degree of symptoms vary by person, and they can change over time. So the symptoms that you see on your screen, if you experience those for more than 2 weeks, they may indicate depression. And these are so important that I am going to read them. So a change in eating habits that may result in unwanted weight gain or loss, a change in sleep patterns, which can be too much sleep or not enough sleep. If you find you're feeling tired all the time, that can be a problem. A loss of interest in people or in activities, anything that once brought you pleasure. If you find you don't have that anymore, that's something to be concerned about. If you find that you're getting easily agitated or angry a lot, that's another sign. Feeling that nothing you do is good enough, that's a sign of depression. And certainly if you have any thoughts of death or suicide or attempting suicide, you need to get help immediately. In addition, one that's not listed there that I want to mention is if you have ongoing physical symptoms that do not respond to treatment, things like headaches or digestive disorders or chronic pain, those are things you want to get checked out too. It's important that we become aware of these symptoms, and it's most important that if you have the symptoms, that you reach out and seek help. Okay, so now let's talk about serious depression and ways that we can prevent serious depression. So early attention to symptoms of depression is one of the best things that we can do. That may help to prevent the development of a more serious depression over time. So if any of those symptoms I just talked about a couple of minutes ago were things that you recognized, you don't want to ignore them, because ignored they may get worse. So the National Institute of Mental Health offers the recommendations that you see on your screen. So let's talk about those for a minute. First of all, what you want to make sure you do is set realistic goals in light of your depression and assume a reasonable amount of responsibility, which means you may not be able to do it all. That's what that means. The second thing you want to do is to break big tasks into small ones, and then you want to set priorities and do what you can do. So again, this is lowering expectations, taking tasks and making them easier, and just doing what you can do. The third thing is trying to be with other people can often help. Being isolated makes depression worse. Now, in addition to being with other people, most of us really need someone we can confide in. And that's really a better way to go, to tell someone that you trust and who cares about you, look, I'm struggling. That's really a better route than being secretive or being alone. The other thing you want to do is participate in some activities you love, whatever that is. What makes you feel better? What do you enjoy doing? For some people, it's going to a movie or a ball game, maybe going to a religious event or a social or community event. It might be doing some exercise that you love, like bicycling or taking a walk or being outside. Whatever it is, make sure that you do something that you enjoy. And then you got to have realistic expectations, because we know that people's moods improve gradually. They don't just go from being depressed one day to feeling great another day. So, feeling better takes time, I think, is the message there. And then finally, it's advisable to postpone important decisions until the depression is lifted. So before deciding to make a significant life transition, like changing jobs or getting married or divorced or moving, discuss it with other people who know you well and who may have a more objective view of your situation. That's really important. We know that people rarely snap out of a depression, but we do know that people can feel better day by day. The most frequent treatment for depressive symptoms that have progressed beyond this mild stage is antidepressant medication in conjunction with talk therapy. So, again, if you feel that you're quite depressed, that is not a sign of failure if you end up needing medication along with therapy. That is a sign that you're getting the help you need. A mental health professional can assess your condition and can help you figure out what's the best treatment for you. You two can decide that together. Now, before we get into the ways to help you cope with the stress of caregiving, we're going to talk about one of the more difficult situations that's a challenge for many of you I know on the phone, and that's dealing with persons with dementia or Alzheimer's, and how do we care for them in a way that doesn't create more stress. So many family caregivers presently care for either a parent or a spouse who's suffering from some form of dementia. In fact, the frequency of dementia increases with rising age. So when we look at 65 to 69-year-olds, it's only 2%. When you look at 75 to 79-year-olds, it's 5%. And then if we jump to 85 to 89-year-olds, it's more than 20%. So incredibly high percentage of people that need some help at that stage because they have dementia. Obviously, caring for someone with dementia requires a great deal of time and patience, and often adds a lot of stress to the caregiving situation, especially as memory loss progresses. In fact, according to Drs. Janice Kuykolt-Glaser and Ronald Glaser, the stress of family caregiving for persons with dementia has been shown to impact a person's immune system for up to 3 years after the caregiving ends. That's incredible, isn't it? So even after the person you're caring for passes, for up to 3 years, you can still see the result of that on their immune system. And so it's key to make sure you're getting care, because we know that that can mean an increase of developing a chronic illness yourself if you don't take care of yourself. So let's do a little review about what dementia is. You see some of this on the screen. So, well, we all have memory lapses as we age. So I want to just say right now, if you have memory lapses, you're perfectly normal. That does not mean you have dementia. The term dementia describes a group of symptoms that are caused by changes in brain function. And these changes have serious consequences on things like memory, personality, and behavior. You can see it in all those things. And I probably don't have to tell you, if you're caring for someone with dementia, you know that people with dementia tend to repeat questions. They tend to become disoriented in familiar places. They neglect their personal hygiene or nutrition. And they get confused about things like who someone is, or what time it is, or even what year it is. We know that dementia can be caused by many things, some of which are reversible, so like vitamin deficiencies and poor nutrition, or some people have reactions to medications or problems with their thyroid that cause dementia. But we also know that there are forms of dementia that are not reversible, and the irreversible ones are caused by things such as strokes or Alzheimer's disease. Now, Alzheimer's disease occurs when the nerve endings deteriorate in the brain due to a buildup of what we call plaques and tangles. And what actually happens is it results in the death of a large number of brain cells. The truth is, doctors don't know why this happens yet, but there's research underway to try to determine the causes and the cures for this. According to the Alzheimer's Association, 4.5 million Americans right now are living with Alzheimer's disease. Isn't that amazing? That's a very high number, 4.5 million. Alzheimer's disease is progressive, so it often ends up with the afflicted needing total care 24 hours a day. This is obviously physically demanding for caregivers. And again, if you're a caregiver caring for someone with Alzheimer's, I don't need to tell you how demanding it is. It's also highly emotional, as this person who's your loving relative may eventually look at you like a total stranger, despite all the time and effort you're devoting to their care and well-being. And sometimes seniors with this disease become abusive, both physically and verbally, which again compounds the incredible stress that you're going through as a caregiver. Dr. Richard Schultz is a caregiver stress expert at the University of Pittsburgh. And he warns that caregivers of senior relatives or spouses with Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia are at a great risk of suffering from depression, anxiety, frustration, stress, and anger. So again, if you're listening and you're in that situation, it's not uncommon, there's nothing wrong, and you need to get help. Research shows that caregivers of a family member with dementia face particularly stressful demands because of how long it goes on for. It can go on for years and years and years. And it's also stressful because of the behavioral and the cognitive problems that are associated with dementia, and also the extreme impairments that we see with people who have end-stage dementia. So what Dr. Schultz advises is that caregivers of persons with dementia learn about the challenges they face and seek help early in their caregiving role. So if you're listening right now and you have a family member with dementia, but it's still quite early stages, this is the time you want to get help. You want to get information, you want to find out what services are available, and you want to start putting things in place. What you don't want to do is wait until the stress is overwhelming before you do anything. Okay, so now let's talk about some specific things we can suggest to people caregiving for someone with dementia. So to help you better understand and care for someone suffering from severe dementia or Alzheimer's disease, we recommend these 9 guidelines. The first one you see is understand the disease. Read about it, its effects, so that you're prepared as it progresses. Don't be caught off guard by things. What you'll find is the more that you learn and the more that you understand, you'll be more apt to be patient, and you'll be more apt to be able to cope because things won't be catching you off guard. You'll also realize that the person is not doing this on purpose or trying to make you angry. It is a medical condition. They can't do anything about it. That's the truth. The second thing you see there is enter their world. What this means is don't try to correct the person because they can't be corrected out of dementia. Instead, ask simple questions about their statements, even if they seem strange or about a person who's no longer living. You can ask them if they're talking about a dead relative as though the person's still living. You can ask them questions about that person and engage in a conversation without ever having to say to them, you know, Aunt Betty died 20 years ago. You can just enter their world with that. Honestly, this will make you much less frustrated, and it will make them less frustrated. You see, the third point there is strike a balance. What this means is encourage independence as much as possible. What you want to make sure is that you're prompting or cueing them to do things by themselves or for themselves when possible. So, you know, you can, in the early stages, you can leave a note on the coffee maker and somebody can still make coffee for themselves. Now, as they progress, they won't be able to do that, and you'll need to make the coffee. But you don't need to start making the coffee right away. You can do this slowly. And I would actually say this to anyone on the phone, whether or not your family member has dementia, that as much as possible, maintain their independence and don't do more than you need to do. Encouraging independence is key. The fourth point is get support. Enlist the help of family, of friends, to spend time with your aging relative to give you respite. If you feel like there isn't a family member who will do this or a friend, then if possible, hire a service so that you can go and get some respite. Respite simply means a break, and you need to get a break. It's really key. You can also join a local support group for people who take care of someone with Alzheimer's disease. Your local Alzheimer's Association will have information on that. The next thing you want to do is tap into resources. So what that means is find professionals in your area that can help you with practical tasks, things about making decisions. So this can be anything from elder law attorneys to help you make decisions about power of attorney, asset management, creating a will. You need a team, so you need professional help in getting those things done. The sixth thing you want to do is decide on assistance. So a lot of times what family caregivers talk about is, you know, I'm spending a lot of time with my parent or my spouse, but it's not really quality time. What I'm ending up doing is working the whole time. I'm shopping, I'm taking them to appointments, I'm finding that I'm cleaning. Well, you know, what you want to look at is there a way to get some of the tasks done so that you can spend time with your loved one just as their relative? So, it doesn't mean hiring a home care service, doesn't mean hiring somebody to just clean. Whatever it might be, think about what you could do that would get you out of the task mode and more apt to just spend time with them. The seventh thing you see there is create a positive and comfortable environment. What this means is if there's a lot of noise and agitation and things going on, people with dementia cannot handle that. Too much noise is overstimulating. So even if it's street noise, find a way to block it out. Is it a loud television? Is it a radio? Because what that leads to is increased agitation and increased anxiety. And then one thing you can do that's very, very key is to use effective communication when speaking to someone with Alzheimer's disease or dementia. And this is really, really important. Be aware of the rate of your speech, your pitch, your tone. So what this means is slow down a little bit, smile more, make sure that your tone is relaxed. What you'll find is that people with dementia respond much more to your body language and to your tone than they do to the actual words you're saying. So modifying both your body language and your tone can make a big, big difference. Obviously, caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease is very, very challenging. And I mentioned to you there's great internet sites. The Alzheimer's internet site is alz.org. Definitely worth clicking on for your local area. Very important. Another one is Lisa's Place, which is LEEZAS Place, lisasplace.org. Will give you more information, help, and guidance. These keys that we've just talked about, these guidelines, can be very, very useful. I want to talk to you about some other ways that you can really de-stress caregiving and take good care of yourself, because that's so important. So many caregivers, probably most, struggle to balance caregiving for an aging parent or relative with all their other major responsibilities, the jobs, the kids, their life. That usually means there's little time to care for themselves, and that means that you may find your health declining or high levels of stress. However, again, if you don't care for yourself, you're not going to be able to continue in the caregiving role. You need to think about it, as you may have heard me say on other webinars, caregiving is a marathon, not a sprint, and we can't use crisis behavior, things that we do short-term, for the long-term. You have to find ways to live that are sustainable, and that means you still have to eat right, you have to get enough rest, you have to build exercise into your schedule, and you have to keep your own medical appointments. Those things are all key. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of those specifically. Working out. Find something you like to do. Don't make this another stressor. If you like to walk, walk. If you like to dance, dance. Whether it's swimming, biking, jogging, whatever it is. What you want to make sure you do it, though, is a minimum of 20 minutes at least 3 times per week. And you might want to learn stress management exercise, something like yoga or Tai Chi, because that teaches inner balance and relaxation at the same time. Meditation is such a wonderful tool for relaxation. If you sit still and breathe deeply with your mind as quiet as possible, whenever things feel like they're moving too quickly or you're getting overwhelmed by your caregiving responsibilities, you'll find yourself relax. I know a lot of times we think, I don't even have a minute to do this. I don't have a minute to myself. That's when it's most important to walk away and to take even 1 minute to close your eyes, to breathe deeply, and you'll be amazed at how your body relaxes when you do that. Ask for help. You see we have an asterisk next to that. That's because according to a national survey conducted by the Home Instead Senior Care Network, 72% of adults who are currently providing care for an aging loved one do it without any outside help, 72%. And we can't go long-term and do that. To avoid burnout and stress, you really have to get other people involved, whether it's family members, friends, or if you hire a professional non-medical caregiver for assistance. And you need to do that without feeling bad or guilty for reaching out. I know that asking for help is sometimes difficult, but I'm going to give you 4 surefire ways that you can use to get support. The first thing is make sure everyone has a responsibility, even if it's small, so that the tasks get spread out. And when Mary Alexander gets on during the question and answers, I'm going to ask her to talk about how she did this in her family, because they did such a great job with this. The truth is, even if your sibling lives 1,000 miles away, it can be their responsibility to call your aging parent once a week to check in, or to visit for a week each year to allow you to take your own family vacation. So everybody gets a responsibility, and then the second thing is divide up the tasks. What this means is have a specific family member who handles the medical aspects of things, such as going to the doctor's appointments, talking to the doctors, medication information, and then another may be responsible for groceries and meals, and another for paying the bills. By dividing up the task, each person becomes more involved with the details of the tasks and can keep others abreast of changes, issues, problems. The third thing you want to do is make sure to talk with other family members about your elderly relative. If you don't express your concerns maybe about, geez, mom's health is really going down. Or, I'm spending so much time caring for them, and I don't think you realize that. You can't expect other family members to know what you're thinking and feeling. You really have to tell them. So you have to tell them about the person you're caring for, and you have to tell them about the impact on you. And then this last one may sound funny, but it's so true. Don't be a control freak. If you truly want to control every aspect of the care, then don't be surprised when other family members won't step in, because they're going to think, A, you have it all under control, and B, they're never going to be able to please you. Then they'll be less able to understand your stress level if they believe you're creating it for yourself. Okay, you can see the next thing on that list is take a break. Again, talked about respite care and the need for this. So you can make arrangements for necessary fill-in help and use your family and friends, volunteers to do that, and or include professionals. Take single days off. If you can do it once every couple weeks, that's great. You need to make sure you do take a full day off from time to time. What I do when I work with caregivers is I suggest they start with 3 15-minute breaks during a day, and then add in an hour break, and then add in a week or a day break, and then add in a week. So over time, you're adding in more time. Just make sure that you line up your support system so that when you're away, you're confident that the person you're caring for is safe and happy. And the truth is, when you're away, you need to stay away. Talk about different things, read a book that you haven't been able to get to, but don't think about caregiving. Again, one of the best ways to arrange for respite care, which is short-term temporary care, is to make sure that you talk to your family members about this. It's really important. So you want to make sure you say to your family members, I need a night away, not just a few hours. It's often referred to as the gift of time when we talk about respite care, and you need to make sure you give yourself the gift of time. I know that respite care can require some financial outlay, but you have to weigh that against your mental stability, your health, your ability to continue caregiving. It's probably money very, very well spent. Even using a couple of hours of a service to do errands and shopping can lessen the burden of your caregiving. Agencies that provide information and respite services include hospice care, home health agencies, non-medical senior care agencies, social services, private nursing companies, senior centers, churches, and the National Family Caregiver Association. Another way to ease your caregiver stress is to make sure you're eating well. Make sure you're eating plenty of fruits and vegetables, proteins, nuts and beans, and whole grains. I know it's tempting to indulge in caffeine, fast food, and sugar as quick pick-me-ups, but the problem with those is they also give you a quick letdown. Take care of your health. Make sure that you don't just take your loved one to the doctor, but that you get your annual checkups. Being a caregiver gives lots of excuses for skipping your necessary checkups, but don't do it. It's really, really important. And then I love the next one, indulge. Do something to really treat yourself well. Maybe it's a foot massage or a manicure or a nice dinner out, or maybe it's a concert that you've wanted to go to, but do something that just takes care of you. You shouldn't feel guilty about wanting to feel good. And then the last one on that list is support. What that means is you need to find a local caregiver support group or someone that you can talk to who understands what you're going through and who's probably going through similar things. They'll help you recognize what you're feeling is normal and that there are ways to get through those feelings. This is a great place to get practical advice from people who are in your situation and just to bounce off feelings of stress because, they're probably having it too. And I guess I'll also add in here, the best as possible, maintain your sense of humor. Also know it's okay to say no to other responsibilities. And please don't feel guilty about needing to take time to yourself. Your health and well-being is of utmost importance, both for you and for the person you're caring for. And if you take care of yourself, it'll allow you to be there for them. We don't expect our cell phones to work without recharging them, so we shouldn't expect ourselves to continue to go and go and go without recharging ourselves either. Okay, let's now look at some resources that you may want to consider as you're thinking about your caregiving experience. So you see there, www.caregiverstress.com, fabulous resource has both informational materials and materials on emotional issues so that you can get on that site and really do a lot of searches looking at some topic that's of importance to you, and I think you'll find help there. I've already mentioned to you the Alzheimer's Association, and there's their website again. And again, the caregiver.org, which is the Family Caregiver Alliance, and they have wonderful resources on their website as well. Okay, now let's talk about next steps and where do you go from here. So I've got 3 questions for you to consider. The first one is, what can you do to lessen your stress or depression related to caregiving? And if you find from what we reviewed today that you are experiencing stress or depression, I really want you to not ignore it and to get some help. So make sure that you seek the help you need. And then the second one is, what resources do I need to search, talk to, or meet with to learn more about Alzheimer's or other dementias? So if you have a loved one you're caring for who has dementia, you want to think about the resources that you need to look at to make sure that you're prepared for the next stages and that you know what's coming. And then the million-dollar question is, what are you going to do to take better care of yourself? And I hope that before you hang up the line today, you have one thing that you're going to focus on, because that is so important that as a caregiver, you take great care of yourself. Okay, I'm now going to pause. I'm going to turn this back to Steve, and we're going to go to questions and answers.
Thanks, Dr. Amy. Great presentation.
Thank you.
A lot of informative information. As Amy said, I would like to invite you at this time to please send in your questions and answers for Dr. Amy. You can send in your questions using the questions box there you see on your screen. At this time, I would also like to welcome Mary Alexander from Home Instead Senior Care to the Q&A portion. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you for having me today, Steve.
No problem. It's good to have you. And let's jump right into the questions here. The first one, I've been a primary caregiver for my mother for the past 5 years. I feel very stressed quite often and have some of the symptoms that you mentioned for depression. But how can I be sure that I am depressed and not just stressed?
That's actually a great question, Steve. And what I would say is you need to make an appointment with your doctor, and your doctor can help assess that. You shouldn't try to do that on your own, and your doctor can help assess whether or not you need treatment for depression or whether you just need to start addressing some of the stress symptoms. So that's my view on that. Mary, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'm just going to give a personal view. I think I was questioning the same thing when I was dealing with both my parents' illnesses, and I realized that I had a different word for it, and I was just simply sad. But I did need to go and seek some advice from a professional just to see what category do I fit in and how do I get out of it, because I knew I wasn't quite where I should be, but again, I wasn't going to self-diagnose myself, and it ended up I was just sad, and I really just needed someone to talk to.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, Mary, about someone to talk to, because, I really believe when we're going through stressful times, we all need someone to talk to, and sometimes a friend is enough or a support group, and sometimes it's not, and we need to talk to a professional.
Right.
Okay, the next question. I'm a primary caregiver for my grandmother who is suffering from Alzheimer's disease. I would really like some more information to help me as a caregiver, but can't spend a lot of extra money on the materials. Do you have any suggestions on where I can find some resources?
Dr. Amy gave some resources. Caregiverstress.com is a great resource, but specifically for Alzheimer's, there is a great site called helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. Again, that's helpforalzheimersfamilies.com. And there's a free online training. It's great. And there's also downloadable documents and live journals and all kinds of great information that I would strongly suggest that you look at that website and spend some time really digging through it. A lot of great information.
Amy, do you have anything you can add?
No, I actually think that's, I was just listening to that thinking, well, I love that site. Again, we mentioned the other site is Lisa's, what's the second half of that? I'm sorry.
Lisa's Place.
Thank you, Lisa's Place. And that's also another great site for resources.
Yes, it's lisasplace.org. I've sent out the URL for that one.
Oh, good.
You also see the URL. I've sent it out to the attendees here, helpforalzheimersfamilies.com.
Fabulous resource.
Right there.
Yeah.
So you can click on that and go check that out. As always with part of these webinars, we like to include some helpful resources and suggestions from the attendees. This isn't a question per se, but it is a resource. And this person writes in, when providing resources, please remember to include the area agency on aging and disability that is located in each county in the country. Each of these has a family caregiver program that provides respite, education, resources, and support groups. So I did want to give an acknowledgement to that great resource that one of our attendees sent in.
And I'd like to add to that because I think the area agencies on aging do fabulous work, and I agree they're always worth recommending on these things. And anyone listening, that's a great resource to go to in your community.
Yes, the area agency on aging and disability is the key words to search on that one. Okay, next question. How do you know when a person with dementia should no longer be at home? Tough one.
You know, that's such an individual situation because it depends on the family situation. What the number one word that comes to my mind is safety on this. If there's a safety issue, that needs to be addressed. It doesn't mean that they need to leave their home, but we never want to ignore safety issues. And so if, as a family, you were uncertain, it's a very good idea to get a professional involved to see their opinion about whether someone can be maintained at home safely or if it's time to make a move. And one professional that you can turn to for that is a geriatric care manager, and you can go to caremanager.org. There's the website and put in your zip code, and it will give you a list of people. If you cannot afford that, because there is a cost to that, you can also call the Adult Services Unit of your County Department of Social Services for some guidance. But you need to do something if you're uncertain, again, because of the safety issues involved. We know that people can stay at home a very long time if they have the right supports, both the caregiver and the person who needs care. So, you know, if you bring in home care, if the person may go to an adult day program, there's lots of ways to maintain people in the community. But that doesn't mean that's for everyone. So it's a very individual thing that needs to be assessed. And I'm sure Mary has some things to add on that one.
Yeah, you know what, I would say the same word came to mind, safety. And I think if you step back and look at the overall situation, if your loved one cannot be left alone and is not safe in the home, then you know that you have to make a tough decision and move them into a place that they will be safe at. And, you know, when Amy talked a little bit about just the coordination of services, it takes a lot to keep someone home with Alzheimer's or dementia in the mid to late stages. And so making sure that you have a good plan, a good coordination of services. But again, another great tip that Dr. Amy just talked about was adult day services. That takes the pressure off during the day, but then you have the night to worry about. So again, safety is exactly what I would say as well, Amy.
Great.
Okay, next question. How can I interest my husband in activities? He only wants to learn from books, but he isn't always capable of this, and then he only wants to sleep. I'm trying to keep him active and interested.
You know, again, we don't have a lot to go by on that question. Stimulating someone who is experiencing Alzheimer's or dementia is tough, but you have to try many different types of activities. So if books are his favorite, then I wonder if you can look for opportunities to correlate a book with maybe a video and start to try and introduce a book with something else at the same time so that it becomes kind of a coordinated piece for him. But again, we don't have a lot of information to go on specifically about what stage he's in and what he likes and how he's stimulated. Dr. Amy?
I think what I would say to that is one of the recommendations we make, which I think is a key one, is I really think we have to look at a person's past and see what they've been like. You know, there is something that we know when you're working with someone with dementia that if you can reach into their past and find what their interests were or what was something that delighted them, to use that word, that sometimes some aspect of that will continue. And that's why really understanding, where someone came from. So if somebody loved to garden, for example, providing maybe a little opportunity to do a little window box. It doesn't have to be a big garden. It could just be a couple of plants. But something that got them doing the things they used to love to do, if they used to love puzzles. So you have to think about who the person's been throughout their life and then base their care based on that. Now, it doesn't mean that that's going to work necessarily, but sometimes that's where the key lies, is in the person's life story.
Okay, the next question. There are four adult siblings in our family. Our elderly mother has been diagnosed with dementia. Some of the siblings are contributing quite a lot to the in-person and hands-on caregiving, and some of them are not. What can we do about this situation as it's starting to cause a rift between us?
I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to share our personal experience with my family. And I think the first thing that all the siblings have to realize is it's never going to be exactly balanced. So equity needs to be thrown out the window because, if you're looking to share it exactly even, it's just simply not going to work. Families, lives, responsibilities, all that comes into play. With my siblings, we all sat down once we knew what we were dealing with and said, look, here are all the tasks that have to get done. Here are all the financial issues we have to deal with. Let's really talk about who's best suited and who has the ability to do them. And, there were some spirited discussions between all of us, but at the end of the day, it seemed like we all fell into a great working coalition group together to take care of my mom. My brother, who was struggling with anything hands-on, we ended up letting him continue to run the family business. We didn't have to worry about it because he simply just did not feel comfortable doing any type of personal care services or any of those types of activities with my mom. Where my one sister, she took care of all the doctor appointments, scheduling all the tests, making sure all that happened. Now, we all shared getting her to and from, but again, it was about dividing up the tasks that needed to be done and everyone kind of ebbing and flowing into this when they had the ability to do that. But it's really a juggling act.
All right, the next question. Oh, yes,
yeah.
Please,
go ahead. No, go ahead, Steve, because Mary gave a great answer to that.
Okay. Next question. My husband is frequently time confused. He'll think it's a holiday or a different day and is very frustrating since it's hard to try to convince him otherwise. How should I respond to his confusion?
I'm going to share a quick story, and then I'm going to let Dr. Amy talk about the more professional aspect of that answer. It was interesting. My grandmother suffered from Alzheimer's, and my 7-year-old son used to go over to their house after school. And so she would ask, what's the weather like? What's the weather like? And she'd do it repeatedly 8 or 10 times in the hour and a half, 2 hours that my son was there. And my son would give her a different answer every time. And I finally said, why are you telling Grandma it's raining when it's sunny? And why are you telling Grandma that it's snowing when it's July? And he would say, well, Mom, because she doesn't get upset anymore when I talk about it, because then we talk about the weather. So a 7-year-old was able to teach me that it didn't matter that my grandmother knew that it was sunny or raining, that it really just mattered that she wanted to have a conversation and talk. So I think the things that matter most to us, we have to say, in the scheme of things, does it matter what time of day it is? Does it matter what the weather is? And if they continue to ask that question, use it as an opportunity to have a discussion. Amy?
Yeah, and I would just add, you cannot, people are not doing this on purpose. Giving them the correct answer, trying to make them see it the right way won't work. It doesn't matter. It's not a matter of lying. It's a matter of entering their world again and just going with what is. So it's okay if people get confused. You can't talk them out of the confusion, so you don't have to add to it by arguing. There's no need to argue. You can just ask a question. Oh, that's interesting, and ask a question about it. So I think Mary's son had the right approach.
Okay, great. Well, we are just about out of time for today's web seminar, but I want to thank our two presenters for a great session today, Dr. Amy Dupree and Mary Alexander. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.